Many of us dream of having a modern modular kitchen with smart pull-out drawers and sleek built-in cabinets. But the reality is, not everyone has the option to tear everything down and start over. Or maybe you're living in a rental with fixed wooden cabinets that feel like they're from your grandparents' era. I've been there too, feeling frustrated with a kitchen that didn't fit my needs at all, cabinets that were too deep to reach into awkward, dead corners going to waste, and tools that seemed to multiply by the day. Over time, though, I realized something important: you don't need to replace the entire kitchen to transform it. By changing the way you think about organization, even an old kitchen can become surprisingly stylish, functional, and easy to live with. I realized that the problem wasn't a lack of space in my kitchen, but the way I kept focusing on what I didn't have instead of making the most of what was already there. Once I stopped thinking about replacing cabinets or doing major renovations and started paying attention to the small, overlooked spaces, everything began to shift. Smart movable accessories didn't just make the kitchen look neater, they completely changed how I use the space every single day. Tip 1. Look up and use the empty wall space. Since the lower kitchen cabinets are vain and almost impossible to change, I decided to shift my focus upward to the space above. This was an area I had barely used before, even though it had so much potential. Once I started hanging things on the wall, the biggest difference I noticed was how the countertop could finally breathe again. The kitchen no longer felt cramped, and I didn't have to work around clutter every time I cooked. I use a pegboard to hang pots, pans, cutting boards, and the tools I reach for daily. What I love most is that everything is right in front of me and within arm's reach, no need to open cabinets or bend down to search. Over time, this wall stopped being just a storage solution and became a living part of the kitchen, almost like a visual snapshot of my everyday cooking rhythm. Alongside that, a magnetic knife strip turned out to be a small change with a big impact. The knives stay dry visible and easy to grab instead of being crammed into a traditional knife holder. More importantly, I no longer feel that sense of mess whenever I open a drawer. Everything feels clearer, safer, and far more organized. Tip 2. Rethink and upgrade old cabinets from the inside. Old kitchen cabinets that are deep and tall used to be my biggest frustration. Things were stacked on top of each other, and the very back of the cabinet was almost always forgotten because reaching in felt like a chore every single time. Instead of seeing this as a flaw, I started looking for ways to break the space down into smaller, more usable sections. I added tiered shelf inserts to make better use of the cabinet's height. By placing plates, bowls, and cups on separate levels, I no longer have to lift an entire stack just to grab one item from the bottom. Everything feels lighter, neater, and much easier to manage. For the deepest part of the cabinet, the area I almost never touched before, I installed pull-out wire baskets with sliding rails. The difference was immediate. With a gentle pull, everything at the very back comes fully into view. No more forgotten items, no more out of sight, out of mind. The cabinet finally functions as real storage, not just a place where things disappear. Tip 3. Build flexibility with movable pieces. When fixed storage wasn't enough, I learned to add items that could move with me. This simple shift made daily kitchen routines feel far more flexible and intentional instead of restrictive. I chose a 3-tier kitchen cart, and it quickly became a true helper. Sometimes it holds spices and cooking oils. Other times it's a temporary iome for vegetables or tools I'm using that day. What I love most is that it moves to where I need it instead of me constantly walking back and forth to cabinets. I also use clear containers and sorting baskets for dry goods. Being able to see what's inside helps me keep track of what I already have, what I'm running low on, and prevents unnecessary overbuying. When similar items are grouped together in their own baskets, finding things becomes effortless, and the kitchen naturally stays neater without much extra effort. Tip 4. Group items by category, not just by space. After clearing out space and adding flexible storage, I noticed another issue. If things are only put away neatly, but not clearly grouped, clutter comes back very quickly. That's when I started zoning the kitchen, giving each category of items a clear home of its own. I transferred all my dry goods into clear containers using both plastic and glass. The biggest change wasn't how the kitchen looked, but how much more control I had. With just a glance, I can tell how much is left and whether I need to restock. I no longer buy duplicates simply because I forgot what I already had, and expired items are far less common. At the same time, I use woven and plastic baskets to group similar items together. Baking supplies go into one basket, backup spices into another, and less frequently used items still have their own dedicated place. When everything is grouped this way, finding things becomes quick and intuitive, and just as importantly, I always know exactly where to put things back after using them. Since adopting this approach, the kitchen doesn't just look tidy right after cleaning, it stays organized for much longer. Items no longer wander around the space, and I don't have to think twice when putting things away because everything already has a clearly defined spot. Tip 5. Don't overlook the inside of cabinet doors. In the final step, I started paying attention to small details I had always ignored, especially the inside of cabinet doors. By adding a few hooks or slim organizers, I suddenly had extra space for items that used to frustrate me simply because I never knew where to store them. Pot lids, plastic wrap trash bags, everything now hangs neatly, easy to reach and easy to put away. These items no longer take up precious counter space or get shoved into drawers at the last minute. What I love most is the feeling that everything has a place, even the smallest things. These small changes made the kitchen feel noticeably lighter every time I walked in. No major renovations, no new cabinets, just a more thoughtful way of seeing and using the space I already had. Tip 6. Leave intentional empty space. After everything was organized, I realized something very clearly: a kitchen doesn't need to be filled to feel complete. I used to treat empty space as something unfinished, automatically wanting to place more items there. But after living with a tidier kitchen, I learned that empty space is what actually allows the room to breathe. I started leaving intentional gaps, a section of the countertop with nothing on it, a cabinet shelf that isn't used to its full capacity. These open areas make cooking easier and give my eyes a place to rest. More importantly, they remove the constant pressure to fill things up or buy more. The kitchen is no longer just a place to store things, it's a space that quietly supports my daily life. Tip 7. Use light to change how the kitchen feels. I used to pay very little attention to lighting in the kitchen. As long as it was bright enough to cook, it felt sufficient. But once I started reorganizing the space, I realized how strongly lighting affects my mood every time I step into the kitchen. I replaced harsh white bulbs with a softer light, and added a small secondary light near the area where I usually cook. It was a small change, but it made the kitchen feel instantly warmer. Cooking in the evening became more comfortable without that sense of tension or rush. Lighting doesn't just help you see better, it makes you want to stay in the space a little longer instead of finishing up and leaving right away. Tip 8. Let sound and scent shape the atmosphere. Once the kitchen became more organized, I started noticing things I had previously overlooked, like sound and scent. Depending on my mood, I'll play very soft music or simply let the space stay quiet. These subtle sounds help me slow down, so the time in the kitchen no longer feels like housework, but more like a form of self-care. I also keep the scents in the kitchen very light. Sometimes it's just the smell of citrus peels, freshly brewed coffee, or a dish soap I genuinely enjoy. These familiar scents make the kitchen feel more alive and welcoming, and they help me feel at ease every time I step inside, even when I'm not cooking at all. Tip 9. Rely on small habits, not constant effort. In the end, what keeps my kitchen organized isn't the shelves or containers, it's a few simple habits. I return things to their place right after using them, wipe down the countertop before going to bed, and spend a few minutes each week checking if anything has started to wander from where it belongs. I don't try to keep the kitchen perfect at all times. Some days it's still messy, still busy, just like my life. But because the system is clear from the beginning, I no longer feel overwhelmed when it's time to tidy up again. It only takes a little time for everything to fall back into place. And for me, that's what makes a kitchen easy to live with, not demanding too much, but always there to support me on tired days. Tip 10. Refresh the kitchen through small hardware changes. One of the simplest yet most effective ways to update a kitchen is by changing the cabinet handles. Old handles often reveal the age of the space more than anything else. When I switched to new ones with a consistent color and style, it instantly felt like the entire cabinet system had been refreshed. I also replaced or covered small exposed metal details like hinges, hooks, and towel bars. Once these elements were unified and visually cleaner, the kitchen looked far more polished, even though the cabinet structure itself remained exactly the same. Organizing your kitchen isn't just about putting things away, it's about creating a space that inspires you to cook and care for yourself every day. Even a non-modular kitchen can feel warm, functional, and full of personality when you thoughtfully layer modern solutions onto a traditional foundation. Don't wait for your dream kitchen before choosing to live more intentionally. Start with the kitchen you have today and let small changes make a meaningful difference. Thank you so much for listening until the end. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video.